Howdy and welcome to episode 14, guys. Episode 14 of the 240SX 2JZ swap. I can hardly believe that we've got this far. The engine looks beautiful in the car, if I do say so myself, and we are closing in on starting this thing for the first time. So I go back to school in 2 weeks, and that is not enough time for me to get all this stuff onto the engine as I wanted to. I really wanted to paint the intake manifold and paint the exhaust manifold and make everything look very pretty and make it look very presentable. But the new goal is to just get this thing basically enough to the point where we can just start it up. So I was going to install the intercooler and all the piping and stuff like that. That is not going to happen anymore. Instead, we're just going to slap one of the intercooler pipes onto the intake manifold that has the sensors that we need to get it started. We're not going to tuck the harness, the wiring harness or anything. We're just going to have it, hooked up, not really hidden away or anything, just enough to get it so that we can start this thing. So we're going to be working on the fuel lines today because that is something that absolutely needs to get done before we can start this thing up. To do that, we are going to be cutting the original fuel lines that are back here. So one of them's right here, the other's below it. It's just two hard lines that come from the back of the car up to the engine bay. And what we're going to do is we're going to splice into them essentially, or we're going to cut them and then put another line onto them. And to do that, we're using a tube cutter right here. And the lines that we're putting on instead, if I can get one here as an example, are from Chase Bays. They just make a kit for the 240SX for a swap like this. And it's just a line that we are going to slip over the hard line where we cut it, which is this end right here. And then, the other end goes to your fuel rail, your fuel pressure regulator, returning from the fuel pressure regulator, etc. So I'm going to get started with that. The only thing is that the fuel lines are in a position where I can't really film them. So all you do with a tube cutter, it's very simple. You just unscrew this to whatever the width of the tube is. You wrap it, you tighten it onto it, you just twist it around, it'll cut it off. And then we're going to put those lines on instead, and then we'll figure out where we're going to put our fuel pressure regulator, and we'll hook everything up to the manifold, and we should be good to go. Right, so we are under the car, and you can see that this is one of the lines, and that's the other line. We just got, these are the hard lines right here, right there, and then you can see that it's just a little, coupler, sorry it's blurry, but it's just a little coupler that just fits right under the hard line. From there, these go up into the engine bay, and it's difficult to see, but here's the downpipe from the turbocharger, and they go against the firewall behind. You can see the other one's right behind this one, but they go right behind the head over to the other side of the engine where the intake manifold and the fuel rail are, and they come out right below the low pressure AC line. So here they are, and they go right into the fuel pressure regulator. So those are the return and the feed lines, and now I'm just going to lastly attach the easy one, which is the fuel pressure regulator to fuel rail line, and then that is the fuel lines all plumbed up and ready to go. Next up is to install the throttle body. Now they came with a drive-by-wire setup. I'm going to be running a mechanical cable throttle setup that we're just going to be using the stock throttle cable that came with the 240. To do that, we need to take the throttle body apart for the 2JZ, and we need to install this Driftmotion drive-by-wire delete kit for the 2J. And it's just a little Allen wrench and this metal piece that fits inside one of the components of the throttle body. And it essentially deletes the drive-by-wire setting for that. So we're going to go install that now. So you can see here we have the throttle body. And this is, like I said, the drive-by-wire throttle body. So this is where your cable input goes. And if I rotate the pedal position sensor, essentially, you'll see that the butterfly valve doesn't open. And that is what we are going to change. So to install the Driftmotion drive-by-wire delete, all you have to do is take off these 4 Phillips head screws right here. All right, here we go. We're gonna pop this guy off here. And there you go. We are kind of gonna discard the throttle body for a second and just focus on this little sensor right here. So all we have to do is take our Driftmotion drive-by wire delete tab, and it looks just like this. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna slide it right onto this little tab here till it slips all the way on, so we have it installed. Tighten down your set screw with the Allen. They even provide the Allen wrench, which is helpful because this is a small guy. This is a small little screw right here. So that's installed, and now we're just gonna reinstall it back onto our throttle body. All right, so we've got this reinstalled, and you can see that if we now open this, it opens our butterfly valve, which is what we want, but we're not done yet. We have to flip it on over to the other side, and you see all these Phillips head bolts, or screws I should say. You gotta take them all out, and we're gonna have to remove a single gear from this, there's a bunch of gears under this, this cover, and we need to take one of them out. All right, so here we are with all the bolts, or the screws off the cover, and we're gonna take it off. Beautiful. And it is this gear right here that, if you can see, when we rotate the pedal position sensor, it kind of joins the motor along with the top two gears. So we're just gonna pull this out. Boom, it's out. And now it's got a much more responsive feel to it because now we're not spinning this little motor. So that is the throttle body drive-by-wire delete kit installed, and we are good to go. We're just going to put it all back together now. So it is reinstalled. The throttle body is attached to the intake manifold, which is attached to the engine, and this beautiful, beautiful piping job right here is our intake manifold, or our intake, I should say, for just the first start. So it's not pretty, it's not hooked up to the intercooler, it's not hooked up to the turbo, but essentially we needed to install this pipe because it has the air intake temperature sensor, which we need to hook up to get this thing started. So I've just attached this. It's very temporary, trust me, for the time being, but other than that, everything is back together. This has also been installed. This is the CX Racing upper radiator hose. It's a aluminum pipe, and then it comes with the two couplers. It's specifically for this swap in general, and it fits great. So very happy that fits, and that all went together as well. So the only two other things we need to do is get the idle air control valve hose cut and get the AN fittings onto that. And we also need to cut and get the AN fittings onto the oil cooler lines, which are going to go down there. But I don't have the lines cut or anything, so I need to go do that. So I'm going to go be right back with those lines all fitted and cut to length, and just going to throw them on the engine. And we're back. We have our oil cooler set up. Obviously, it's not mounted or anything. We just needed to get the lines attached so oil didn't go everywhere, and they go down all the way to where the oil filter is, so that goes down that way. I have a bunch of gauges hooked up just for the first time we start the car. We have our air-fuel ratio gauge, coolant temperature, and oil pressure. I think those are the most important ones that we need to know for just starting the car. So those are hooked up. We also have our fuel pressure regulator all ready to go. I just attached the vacuum line to the intake manifold, and everything else is pretty much buttoned up and ready to go. So at this point, I'm going to go grab the wiring harness from Wiring Specialties. I'm going to just start hooking stuff together, and we should be on our way to getting this thing started. I also forgot to mention, this little port on the intake manifold is not, obviously it's not stock, but this line goes down to what's called an Iacv valve, so an idle air control valve. Essentially, it takes in air from that little filter there, and depending on what the ECU reads as the RPM of the car, it pushes air through this line and into the intake manifold, and that is what controls your idle. So this little port on the intake manifold is an opening that goes all the way through to the inside here, and that will control our idle for us. So that's what that line is. At this point, I finally managed to get the harness that needs to be inside the car. I got it through that little the hole in the firewall. So we're going to install our Haltech Elite 2000 ECU. It just plugs right into the harness there, and then we should be done with the stuff of the harness that's inside the car. I've already plugged in the chassis interface connectors, so this should be all good. So I'm going to quick pop this in, and then we're going to work on connecting stuff to the engine. Status update. All the spark plugs are out. I just checked the gap on those. I've sprayed some fogging oil down into the cylinders to lube them up just a little before our first attempt at cranking it over. And I've also taken the oil feed line off the turbo and put it into a little plastic bottle. I don't think you can see it. Can you see it? It's off to the side here. Essentially what we're doing is we're just going to crank the car without the spark plugs in, so there's not going to be any compression. It's just going to turn over, get the oil slinging around inside the engine. We need to get it out to our oil cooler here just so I can check the level of the oil and put in the correct amount, because after it gets kind of pushed through the system, obviously it's going to go down on the dipstick and I'm going to have to add a little more. So here's the first attempt at cranking the car. Is it coming out? Well, it's cranking. Alright, that should be good. So we didn't get any oil into the bottle yet. That's okay. I didn't really expect much to come out anyway, even if it did, because it does take a lot of cranking to get it to come out. So at this point, I'm going to pop the spark plugs back in, get it filled with some coolant, and we are going to see if finally we can try to start this thing. I've also got the base map loaded on. Haltech has been great. They were on the phone with me for like 2 hours and we got the whole base map set up, so we should be good to go. All right, to top it all off, you can see that we have our coil packs installed. These are not obviously the stock coil packs. They are R35 smart coils from the GTRs. Anything over like 450 horsepower, they recommend that you upgrade your coil packs. So these are the ones I went with from Wiring Specialties. They pop right in, require minimal, what would it be, modification to the engine to get them to fit. The only thing is that the bracket that they fit on kind of hits the rear coolant port, the outlet, at the very back of the head. So you have to kind of fit like a socket extension or something in there and bend it to the left. Pretty easy, but they popped in. And at this point, guys, this car is ready to start. So we're going to leave it off here. I will see you in the next episode, and we will see if we can start this bad boy up.